So what's the best way we can improve our zone 2, our aerobic capabilities? I find one of the best ways is on the turbo, where you can be really specific with your power and watch your heart rate far more easily than if you're out on the road. So what is zone 2? Well, zone 2 is our aerobic training zone where we're purely aerobic. We're probably burning fat a lot, but we're also keeping our lactate in our blood at a low level, and our bodies can easily deal with it, and we can ride at this level for a long time. One of the easiest ways to see if you're in zone 2 is you can still maintain a conversation and have a chat like I am now, but you're still putting some pressure on the pedals, and it still feels like a bit of an effort. It's not really easy, and if you do it for a long period of time, it gets quite hard. But how can we maximize our zone 2 training? Well, we can do that on the turbo, where you can really tune in your power, watch your heart rate, and adjust to keep you right in that sweet spot of zone 2 training. So what do we do to train zone 2? Well, really, we're riding at that zone 2 effort. We're pushing it up over the weeks if we can, so that eventually we find for the same heart rate, we're actually producing more power and cycling quicker. We become more efficient, our bodies start producing more mitochondria, more capillaries, our blood volume goes up, and we generally become far better at endurance activities like running and cycling. So when you're on the turbo and you want to do a zone 2 workout, the best thing to do is obviously warm up for a few minutes, 10-15 minutes, build up to your zone 2 power. And if we're going to have a look in a little while at some data, but what you actually want to do is be working at the sort of top end of your zone 2 if you can, and keep pushing that up over the weeks to improve your efficiency and power at zone 2. So how do we know exactly where we should be setting our zone 2 power, or what sort of heart rate we should be using if we've got some data like power and heart rate? Well, we're going to take a closer look now, but we're going to go inside to do that. Okay, so how do we know where to start training? Well, one method is, of course, using the talking test. If you can just about keep a conversation up and keep riding, that's probably in that sort of ballpark figure for your aerobic training, your zone 2 training. If you want to be more specific and more scientific, you can actually use your heart rate monitor. And here I've got 2 examples of heart rate data. This one over here is training peaks. On the left, set on a threshold heart rate of 163. So that's what I think my threshold heart rate is. In other words, a 20-minute power test. If you've done that, you take your heart rate from that, or if you haven't done that, you could ride as hard as you can for half an hour, take the last 20 minutes of that, whatever your heart rate is there, is or should be your threshold heart rate. So in training peaks, you put your threshold heart rate in, and it's given me an aerobic zone, zone 2, of between 133 and 144 beats a minute. And I'd say when I'm doing zone 2 and talking, if I'm talking a lot, it probably is around the 135, 140 beats. If I don't talk and just focus on the effort, it's probably more near 133 beats, or maybe even lower. And this side is Wahoo, and as you can see, Wahoo Element, when they've done on their app, they've only done 5 zones for heart rate, but I think it equates pretty much to zone 2 is like their cardio zone. And again, you can see around 133 to 136, which is why I like to keep it sort of between those 2 things if I can, of below 135 and lower if I can. That's generally where I do my zone 2 training with heart rate.
But if you want to look at power, again, the two comparisons side by side, although this time it really does match up quite well. It's based on an FTP of 244, which if you've watched my previous video, you will have seen I've sort of adopted a more maybe realistic FTP that I could hold for a much longer time than maybe previously I was using. But this has given me a zone 2 wattage. So on my turbo trainer or out on the bike, if I've got a power meter, I can be working around this sort of level. And on the Wahoo, it's exactly the same for the same power. So that's around 137 to 185 watts is my zone 2. So when I'm training, I'm trying to maintain the lowest heart rate I can, which would be this heart rate here, about 130, 135, but trying to maximize the power, which is about 185. So I'm trying to ride at around 185 watts, hoping my heart rate will be around 130 to 135, especially depending if I'm talking or not.
So I'm going to be pushing up my power in a minute to get to a zone 2 effort, and then I'm going to be holding it there as long as I can and watching my heart rate, which should stay within my zone 2 heart rate, and eventually I'll start to see it drift away or decouple, so that my power might be the same, but my heart rate's going to be getting higher. And at that point, it's probably the point when I know I've done enough and I need to stop there, or at least reduce the power. I could do it another way and watch my heart rate. I know roughly what my heart rate is in zone 2. It's about 130, 135 beats a minute. I can maintain that and change the power as I need to, so that I can stay within that heart rate zone. But again, after a while, I'll notice for the same heart rate, my power is starting to drop. So I'll need to call it quits there. And the key thing is to try to keep pushing so that you keep extending that period. So even if you're not particularly getting stronger, you can hold it for a longer period, which basically means your body's more efficient. It's handling that lactate better in your body, which means you're building a wider base to your fitness pyramid, which is only a good thing.
Okay, so if we want to look at some sort of data of mine over the last few months, this is last October, and I do on Trainer Road, I set the power, and well, I've got this program set up, this workout set up, which is normally far bigger than I actually ride for, but it's there. So if I want to extend it and carry on riding, I can. Basically, I do a warm up, and then after about 15 minutes, hopefully, if not, I've sort of pushed the power up to reach the power I want. And then I ride at that power for as long as I can before my heart rate really starts ramping. And recently I've only been doing about an hour after I've warmed up, an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. What I really should be doing is pushing that out longer. But as you can see on this one in October, well, that is an hour and 15 minutes ish. I did 169, 170 watts and 127 heart rate. So as you can see, that heart rate's a little bit lower than the 133, 135. So I probably could have pushed that up a bit, but that was in October. And I also look at the first 5 minutes after my heart sort of settled down and get an amount for that. So that was 169 and 127 heart rate. And at the end, I'll have a look at another 5 minutes, and that was 170 to 125. So in this case, actually, my heart rate isn't really after an hour going up. So it means, I guess, I'm aerobically pretty fit for that hour. So what I really need to be doing is pushing that longer until I do see that heart rate drift and that heart rate decoupling from the power. And that would show me that I need to, continue to work on that to push that out to increase my aerobic base. Anyway, so that was October. If I have a look at what day is this? March, so just recently, just a week or two ago. That power was 170. So after doing quite a lot of zone 2 training, as well as any other training, I did this in March, and that hour was, or just under an hour, was 184 watts for 129. So the heart rate, 127, 129, is pretty similar, but the wattage has hopefully gone up about 14, 15 watts. Okay, so again, that shows me that I am making progress. My wattage has gone up. Again, that first 5 minutes was 184 for 127 beats a minute, and at the end, slightly risen, 184 for 129 beats a minute. So you can see that with that higher wattage, it is pushing me. My body is finding it a little bit harder, but that's what I need to keep doing. And the next ride I do, I might try 190 watts and see how long I can ride at that wattage. Hopefully the heart rate won't go too high, but I'd expect it to drift more than it has done, because I'm, pushing my body. And the idea is the more you do that, gradually you'll see your wattage does go up for a given heart rate, especially if you extend the length of time you're doing it. And my aim would be maybe to even reach 200 watts at zone 2. So I might have quite a way to go for that, and I probably need to do a lot more zone 2 training to really develop that. One thing I thought was quite interesting was before Christmas I was quite ill, and I had a chest infection that knocked me out for about a month. This program here, or this workout here, as you can see, I was just sort of setting the level as I went. And for that hour, for 135 heart rate, I only managed 154 watts. So that's almost down 30 watts from what I'm doing now, and probably about 15 watts down from what I was doing, a couple of months ago. So you can see that, when you're ill, how much it takes out of you. And it's taken me a long time to recover, or to bring back the power to what it was in October that we first looked at. That day in October, it took me at least probably a month or two to gradually start being at least where I was. And then now it looks like I'm actually making a bit more progress and going beyond where I was in October. So just, another little thing that shows how much, as you get older, how much being ill or being incapacitated, it really takes it out of you. When you don't work out for a month, your fitness does drop. Okay, so as an example of what you can do to push yourself today, this is my workout today, and I decided to up my power to, as you can see at the top here, about 190 watts. So for an hour, I rode 189 watts, and that heart rate is obviously a little bit higher than the other ones we looked at, but 135 is sort of within that zone of zone 2 for me. So that's not bad, but hopefully if I continue to do some rides at 190 watts, that will push out that aerobic base, and my heart rate should start dropping. But as you can see here, through the ride, my heart rate did start to climb, which indicates that there is that drift between the two. So that is probably my limit at the moment. So yes, that would be a good area for me to work on, trying to push that out and keeping that heart rate a little bit lower, but still working at about 190 watts.
Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Hope it's given you some ideas of how to maximise your zone 2 training and get the most out of it. If you did like it, please consider subscribing to the channel to help it grow, and keep watching for more content like this in the future. Thanks.